Jujutsu Kaisen's power system is one of the most complicatedly simple in modern shonen, with hard set rules, conditions, and ultimate moves. So, what would happen if you took the wrecking ball of Jojo Stands to that power system and let things run wild? Specifically, what if the sheer untold scale of death, destruction, and chaos during the Shibuya Incident caused the awakening of certain powers among the city's civilian population, abilities that operate on a completely different plane of rules than Jujutsu sorcery, and frankly, kick its ass? To start off though, how and why would this premise take place? Well, to get into that, it's important to note that the lore behind stands and their manifestation varies quite a lot depending on which part of JoJo you're talking about. One thing that's fundamental to all of them though, is that they represent the user's fighting spirit or soul in its purest form. Now, mostly, the ability to manifest a stand is an innate one that you're either born with or not. But there are exceptions to this, and lucky for this little experiment of ours, the Shibuya Incident provides pretty much the perfect conditions for those exceptions. Specifically, supernatural exposure, near-death experiences, and extreme mental trauma. In case you've forgotten just how much of that was present in Sukuna and Jogo's fight alone, yeah, Shibuya got pretty cooked. That's not even to mention the general destructive fighting all over the place, and Gojo's 0.2 second domain in the subway. Standing at a whopping population of over 230,000 people, statistically you'd end up with at least a couple dozen stand users at the time, with their abilities varying from simple defensive stands that shield them, all the way to stands holding untold destructive potential. Now, perhaps most importantly, stands aren't something that require crazy levels of training and control for their abilities to manifest. Sure, those things may help, but compared to cursed techniques and cursed energy usage, which are a fully learned power, stands kinda just do the work for you. If we're being real though, these are humans who have no clue the supernatural even exists in their world. Naturally, the first thing to break out would be absolute panic and chaos, as invisible forces start tearing each other and the surrounding area to shreds. Because just like cursed energy and phenomena, stands can't be seen by the average person. Only stand users can see other stands. So the initial situation would play out as an absolute disaster, with one small subset of humans whose invisible superpowered partners suddenly start responding to the freaks, turning Shibuya into an active volcano, and the ordinary Joes who can only see the after effects of it all. That kind of panic would only cause more problems, as instead of suddenly being vaporized by Sukuna and Jogo's fight, they'd actually know what's happening. The outflow of negative emotions from virtually the entire population would completely flood all of Shibuya, and that in itself completely changes the landscape of the Shibuya Incident, not only by adding a new power system into the mix, but shifting the balance of the existing one too. Think about it. What's the #1 cause for the creation of cursed spirits within JJK? Leaked negative emotions like fear, hatred, regret, anxiety, trauma, and death-related dread. Every single one of those emotions would be at an all-time high in this scenario, because in almost every single building, a stand user is created, and the people have the time to actually realize something's wrong. As the stands continue to manifest, they'll instinctively try to fight back against whatever's causing the destruction that's terrifying their masters. The problem is, though, they can't see cursed spirits any more than non-stand users can see stands. That adds a whole extra factor to the overall equation. Now, bear with me for a minute here, because I'm going to be talking about the overall scenario for a bit before getting back to stands themselves. To sum up, we've got Jujutsu sorcerers duking it out with cursed spirits and curse users all over Shibuya. We've got Gojo in the subway activating his 0.2 second domain to spare all the civilians down there. And we've got Sukuna and Jogo turning their surroundings into scorching craters. At the same time, the normal humans can't actually see anyone except the sorcerers, but they can feel the effects of all that's happening. And then, at the same time, some of them are manifesting stands that none of the truly ordinary humans can see, including the sorcerers. Naturally, the stand users are most likely to freak out and incorrectly assume that the other stand users are causing whatever the hell is going on, which will inevitably result in infighting between them, and instinctively, their stands as well. To the normies, this'll look like a bunch of people suddenly going insane, screaming at other people and invisible forces attacking each other on top of everything that's already happened. And now, we're at the crux of the situation, an incredibly and dramatically accelerated instance of natural selection and rebalancing of power. First off, the unbelievably immense outpouring of cursed energy from the civilians would flood Shibuya, and settle over it like a thick veil of darkness. This would near instantly cause the creation of whole new cursed spirits, and not just swarms of small, insignificant ones, but also ones that can reach up to the heights of special grade level disasters. Now yes, under normal circumstances, curses form quite slowly over an extended period of time. But Jogo, Hanami, Dagon, and Mahito kind of prove that's not always necessary, since they're relatively young curses that formed rapidly because of modern civilization and population density lowering the time requirement. It's just that normally, cursed spirits form from the passively leaked cursed energy of the population's subconscious fears and negativity, like the fear of, say, drowning. Most people definitely have that, but it's not really something that's actively at the front of your mind. In this case, though, you've got a couple 100,000 people actively outputting immense fear, anxiety, and anger. So the balance in numbers dramatically shifts against the Jujutsu sorcerers at this point. But that's not even the worst part of how bad it gets for them. Because not only are new cursed spirits born, but the existing ones get massively buffed on top of it, thanks to the leaked CE, basically supercharging them. This then brings us to the natural selection that the newly born stand users would suddenly experience. See, while stands wouldn't leak CE themselves, since they're just manifestations of the soul, stand users will indirectly attract far more curses, because unlike the normies, they'll be experiencing even more trauma and existential dread from actually seeing all the other stands. And out of self-preservation and mass hysteria, they will end up fighting their own battles, which means even higher CE leakage, which means being a walking CE hotspot that attracts cursed spirits like moths to a flame. What does this lead to? The culling of all the weaker stands in bulk, either to other stand users or the newly born cursed spirits. By the end of that, we'd be left with only the strongest of the stands and their users surviving. But why? There's one more thing that had happened. See, stands themselves can't become cursed spirits, but guess what? Their powers are bound to their user's soul. So, when a stand user dies violently, their lingering psyche and CE could very well form vengeful curses that mimic their stand abilities quite closely. As all of this happens, the higher-level sorcerers in Shibuya like Nanami, Mei, and Nyobito will realize that something is wrong. They can't see stands, yes, but they can sense the sudden shift in the cursed spirit population, and the deaths occurring by the thousands. Despite this, they have no way of knowing exactly what just changed. Barrier techniques can't detect the stands, sorcerer surveillance outright fails, and Jujutsu HQ likely brands this as the work of some new type of curse, not realizing how wrong they are. For the first time, the Jujutsu system encounters something it cannot classify, exercise, or predict in any way. As everything already mentioned is happening, each individual battlefield will experience significant shifts, starting with Gojo in the subway, with the imminent threat of Mahito visibly transfiguring humans into fleshy cursed blobs. The stand users among the subway civilians would awaken at once, and the whole floor would turn into a free-for-all as toxic and lawless as an Xbox Live lobby in the 2000s. Amidst this chaos, two major things happen on Gojo's side of things. Number one, Kenjaku's unable to use the prison realm since there's no way anyone would be able to stay in place long enough to trap. On the surface, this is a major win for the Jujutsu sorcerers, but that's where number two comes in. Gojo's Infinity has always been one of the most conceptually busted abilities in anime, allowing him to contend in power-scaling arguments with verses well above JJK's power level because of technicalities. Well, when it comes to stands, that kinda gets flipped on him instead. Because while yes, Infinity activates on all physical matter, there are obvious exceptions. Like, take air for example. Infinity's obviously not working on that, or Gojo literally wouldn't be able to breathe, smell, or hear anything. Even more so, it may seem like an automatic defense thanks to how effortlessly Gojo pulls it off. But Infinity's more of a target-based technique that he's mastered to the point of managing it subconsciously. After all, he's perfectly capable of walking through crowds, shaking people's hands, wearing clothes. Rather than repelling all matter, Infinity repels specific vectors in space that Gojo's subconsciously designated as hostile. So then, how's that apply to stands? Well, simply put, it depends, because not only are they a phenomenon he's never encountered before, but the six eyes would only allow him to partially see them. That is, he'd be able to see the spatial distortion in the ambient cursed energy caused by them being there, but not their actual appearances. On top of that, there's the matter of stands not being a strictly physical entity in the first place. Rather, they're soul-based beings that interact directly with physical reality. So, stands that work by affecting physical space, specifically punching types like Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond? Infinity most likely would repel those, since they exert force as a physical vector approaching Gojo. But then there are remote and intangible stands like Hierophant Green and Stone Free Threads, which can just manifest inside Infinity to begin with. And that's not even mentioning the reality-affecting stands like Gold Experience, King Crimson, and Made in Heaven, which affect everything rather than trying to hit a specific target. In concept, it's actually a pretty similar loophole to Sukuna's eventual creation of the world-cutting slash. But never mind that for now. In summary, while not all stands would necessarily bypass Infinity, the remotely manifesting and reality-affecting ones most definitely would. For the first time since Toji, Gojo would be up against something that's an actual threat to him, adding even more pressure against the Jujutsu sorcerer's side. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Mahito would actually get a massive advantage from the addition of stands. After all, they're manifestations of their users' souls, and Mahito's whole thing is manipulating those according to his whims. Now, you'd think Mahito would still have trouble initially since he can't actually see the stands, but his specialty makes this a really moot point. Because of his innate soul manipulation, Mahito would instantly recognize the presence of individuals with awakened souls, which is what the stand users essentially are. Not only would this allow him to identify the users instantly, he could study the structure of their souls and mimic it by transfiguring himself. In doing so, he'd become able to see stands even better than stand users. His soul-based moveset would even let him see the connection between user and stand, like a metaphysical umbilical cord. And through this newfound perception, he's the worst enemy of any stand user. By transfiguring himself to figuratively get on the same wavelength as stands, Mahito could almost certainly use his transfiguration on the stands. Even if we argue that that's not physically possible, he can still just transfigure the user and reshape their soul, and thus their stand, however he wishes. At that point, he could build himself a whole army of stand users under his command, giving him a force of fighters the Jujutsu sorcerers have no defense against. And finally, that brings us to Sukuna. Unlike Gojo and his 6 eyes, or Mahito and his soul manipulation, Sukuna doesn't have any way to identify stands for what they are. So what would he think just happened when some ordinary civilian stand seemingly does the impossible and puts a scratch on his vessel, Yuji's body? To him, they'd just be invisible beings that can bypass physical durability altogether to attack the soul directly. The logical conclusion, for him at least, would then be that this is a new and evolved form of cursed spirit, or even Shikigami, that's bound to the user's soul. So really, he'd mostly be right, just with the wrong terminology. As the malevolent and chaos-craving being that he is, Sukuna would experience 2 things. 1, overwhelming excitement over the potential destruction these new beings can bring about. And 2, the singular and all-encompassing thought of mine. Spoiler warning for anime-onlys in 3, 2, 1. As we know, Sukuna loves taking others and their powers for himself, most evident in his possession of Megumi, so he could gain the 10 Shadows technique and tame Mahoraga. At the point in the story where the Shibuya Incident occurs, the idea of gaining one of these new and evolved Shikigami of his own would be irresistible to him. And the worst part is, he could probably do it, and all he'd need to do is cut a deal with Mahito, something which, realistically, wouldn't be that hard for the King of Curses. By having Mahito fiddle with his soul, Sukuna could catalyze his own stand awakening, granting him a whole new ability that takes him from the strongest in history to the strongest in existence. Not even halfway to the end of the Shibuya Incident, the awakening of stands has become a death toll for the Jujutsu sorcerers involved. Yuji's out of it, Gojo's on the defensive, the rest of the sorcerers are overwhelmed by the increase in cursed spirits, the civilians are either dead, in a stand war, or enslaved by Mahito, and Sukuna's planning to become an even greater, truly unstoppable threat than he already is. Could he succeed in that attempt? Would Mahito even agree? Will Gojo be able to outmaneuver the few new beings that can bypass his infinity? Can the rest of Jujutsu High's members survive this? And maybe the most important question, is the greatest trump card of Jujutsu sorcery even relevant in this scenario? Because what even happens when a domain expansion captures something that exists on its own plane of reality?